Hello, everybody.
Welcome back to
The
The Down Lore.
I'm Natalie,
I'm Claudia.
and we are gathered here today, as always, on God's internet to talk about the one and the only
Sarah J.
MAAS,
MAAS.
our Lord and our Savior.
Truly, it is not an exaggeration. If you've been following along with us so far, we've been gearing the entire podcast towards new releases. This year in 2024, we started with House of Flame and Shadow, which is the third in Sarah J. Maas's Crescent City series. And then we moved on to Holly Black. We did the Cruel Prince, the Folk of the Air trilogy, Book of Night, Stolen Air duology, leading up to the Prisoner's Throne release. So we've kind of been doing this like chronological, what's coming out next and what do you need to know about everything that precedes it. But today, we're going to take it back.
We're going to take several steps back, and we are going to go to the origin story, the blueprint, the gold standard setter of this fantastical fantasy literary world, which is our queen herself, Sarah J. Maas.
Yes.
For those of you who don't know who Sarah J. Maas is, where have you been? Where have you been?
I really don't think it's possible to be on the internet and be reading and not know who Sarah J. Maas is at this point, or have been exposed to content related to her books and her characters, even if you're like unsure of what it is that you're seeing. She is just, the algorithm is going to show you Sarah J. Maas if you say the word book once near your phone.
She's the paragon of the literary industry. She's sold like 40 or 50 million books, some insane number.
Yeah.
She is truly, and I saw this in a YouTube comment that was supposed to be dashed as an insult. We'll get into this more later. Someone called her the Taylor Swift of the book world. I think that couldn't be more true, but I interpret that as the highest of compliments rather than something disparaging to say about someone. So you mean to tell me she's insanely talented, omnipresent, a business mogul, and really good at her craft? Is that what you're saying? Because that is a set of qualities that Taylor Swift and Sarah J. Maas share.
All of that sounds like goals to me, quite honestly. And I mean, speaking for Natalie and myself in particular, and I know this goes for a lot of people who have gotten back into reading fantasy recently, ACOTAR was our gateway drug back into it. And whether you got it from the internet or got it from a word of mouth recommendation from a friend, or just saw that your friends were reading it and decided to check it out, like ACOTAR is such a cultural staple right now.
It's a phenomenon of the highest order, and I feel like it's made even more phenomenal by the fact that I think a lot of people who pick it up do so begrudgingly. I know for both of us, we were like, I don't know if we'll be into this.
That is so true.
Because before ACOTAR, I had started to get back into reading, but it was mostly like light magical realism, literary fiction, rather than high fantasy.
Yeah.
Which is, I've always been into high fantasy. This is my bedroom. As you can see on my wall over there, we have a poster of Pokemon from the Kanto region. I have about 1 million Pokemon plushies. Like, I'm no stranger to fantastical worlds and lore. But for some reason, the idea of like a romantic fairy story has never been something I've been into. I never really loved like a princess story growing up. It was more like battles and war. So I was like, I don't know if this is going to be for me.
Yeah.
But let me tell you, ACOTAR has it all. And if you've read it,
Thank
if you're
God we were wrong.
Yeah, if you're listening to this podcast, you know the tea.
Yeah. Unlike Natalie, I was coming off of like a big romance bender. I was like in my Colleen Hoover era right before reading ACOTAR, and I had read everything she'd ever written in like 1 month. And then I was like, depresso espresso. Like, what am I supposed to do with my life now?
The book hangover is always real.
Yeah. So after a quick little stint with some hockey smut, which I read on a plane, and that was a violent decision. Then once I was like back from the vacation that said plane took me on, I was like, I can commit to a series. So that was the time I was like, all right, it's ACOTAR go time. And thank God. But I was also a little skeptical in the beginning. I was like, am I going to enjoy fantasy as an adult? Like, I was really into Twilight, had a really big Twilight phase. I was really into Hunger Games, but I was like, oh, maybe this isn't going to be, maybe it's not going to hit as hard as an adult. Ate those words so fast. So fast.
Yep. And I feel like we'll get into this more later, but Sarah J Maas and her ethos of writing, her genre of choice, the timing is really couldn't have been more on her side in terms of having mass market share. And yeah, we'll get into that more later, but first we really just want to talk about what makes her books and her writing the gold standard for the industry. Why is she so popular? What is it about her writing that has sold her tens of millions of copies of books?
Yeah. And we're going to talk about all of her series. Obviously, we've mentioned ACOTAR already. So spoiler alert for A Court of Thorns and Roses, the entire series. Throne of Glass, the
Most
entire
of the
series,
minus
mostly.
Kingdom of Ash, because I haven't read it yet.
Natalie is reading Tower of Dawn right now. And when we do a Throne of Glass episode, we will dive into the controversy over Kale and Tower of Dawn.
I will put my life on the line defending Kale and Irene from Tower of Dawn. Okay, I'm telling you right now, I haven't gotten to the end yet, but it's tracking to be my first 5-star read of the year, and I've read all the other books from the Throne of Glass series this year.
I'm here for Tower of Dawn.
Actually, I lied. It's going to be my second 5-star read of the year because I read this tiny little morsel of a short story called The 6 Deaths of the Saint by Alex E. Harrow, and that was insanely good. I read it
to read that.
in the wake of House of Flame and Shadow. I just needed like a palate cleanser. Picked that up. It was insane. 30 pages long. Absolutely gorgeous. Just stunning. Fantastic. So that was 5 stars for me.
Tower of Dawn might be up there.
Tower of Dawn, I'm just gonna say it, Sarah J Maas's best writing. Her best prose. Her best exposition. Her most rich culture exploration. So good. And
some very nuanced character development.
Yes.
I think regardless of what you think about Kale,
you have to admit
that the character development in that book is significantly well done.
It's tea.
Yeah. And then of course, spoilers for all of Crescent City.
Yes.
So if you haven't read any of that, just be forewarned. And the only thing we will not be spoiling is Kingdom of Ash.
Thank you.
All right, so let's just pause for a minute, zoom out a little bit more, and talk about kind of what we've noticed, like what happens to authors who, like Sarah J Maas, have become like these huge phenomenon.
And I think this happens to not just authors, but anyone who reaches a certain level of status, fame, or celebrity. They're gonna attract attention, both positive and negative, regardless of what they do, what their craft is, and how good they are at it. It just happens. You're gonna have haters, you're gonna have critics, especially with the internet. Like, people just will say shit online, regardless of whether it's true, regardless of whether it has merit, and they will exaggerate and just absolutely go bonkers trying to smear campaign you in Instagram comments. And that Sarah J Maas has not been spared from that by any means. You also get put under a microscope, right? Like, I think authors are a little bit more spared from that than someone who's more really in the public eye, like a musician or an actor or a really prolific CEO or something, where they're just going to be relentlessly scrutinized because their face is all over the tabloids all the time.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily really happen to authors, but there's definitely, as I like to put it, like an event horizon in the black hole of celebrity, where there is a point of no return. When you become a paragon of culture, people are going to hate on you no matter what you do. And there is a lot of Sarah J Maas hate on the internet, whether that's her work itself, her books, as we've talked about many a time already, like people calling them stupid or trash or, not worth your time because they see it as vapid fairy smut, which is doing her work a disservice. They'll try to dig around to find skeletons in her closet and like expose her and cancel her. Cancel culture is crazy. Put her on blast.
Or just like overall saying it's like not good quality writing and therefore you should not read it, as if reading something that is just for funsies rots your brain.
Yeah.
Be serious.
It's not like we're looking for her prose to be like Sylvia Plath. No one wants that. Imagine reading Sylvia Plath trying to talk about fairies fucking. Imagine. It would be horrible. It would be like a train wreck you can't look away from.
My God. And I think part of what makes certain books and series so popular is their bingeability, and you can really only binge them if the writing is good enough to get the point across and to create vivid images in your mind, but also easy enough that you can read quickly. And what I like to call, it's like TikTok but for reading. Like you go down the rabbit hole and you stay there and you're just reading and reading and reading the same way you would swipe TikTok video after TikTok video after TikTok video. And Sarah J Maas's books have that quality to the writing where there's enough description to make it vivid in your mind, but you can go into her world and stay there for a really long time and just crank, which Natalie has had recent experience with.
Yeah, I mean, she just makes it addictive, like accessible, and there's constant action or tension being, built and reduced between characters. She's really good at writing relationships, and her prose is very accessible, so it sucks you in and keeps you there for
hours,
as long as she wants
days,
to.
years.
It's like that scene in the Percy Jackson movie where, like, the original one, not the new TV show, where they go to the casino and they eat the lotus flower and Poker Face starts playing, and then just gets stuck there for like weeks, but it feels like it's been 1 second. It's that's the Sarah J Maas effect. It's the lotus flower effect. It's like a drug. That's why we call it a gateway drug. Like she sucks you in with her characters, her plot. And listen, nothing that she's doing is groundbreaking. We'll get into this throughout because we're gonna do our traditional who, what, when, where, why of the Sarah J Maas zeitgeist. But she's not doing anything that hasn't been done before. Her plots have every trope in the book, but tropes exist for a reason.
Yeah, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's all we're saying.
She's not reinventing the wheel. She's just putting a bunch of different wheels on a cart and dragging it along and
taking us all with her.
Taking us for a fucking journey, all right?
To the bank, honestly, to her bank.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think of all of the books that I have read in the past year plus, I will never know any plot, any characters as well as I know Sarah J Maas's plots and characters. They live rent-free in my brain, day in, day out. I will not shut up about them. They are on every book recommendation I give to anyone. If someone asks me for nonfiction recommendations, I'm like, go read ACOTAR. Do you hate fun? Go read ACOTAR. Yeah, so even once you're done reading them, they never leave your brain. That's just how impactful her books are.
Completely. And I think ACOTAR, the reason why it's more of a gateway drug than even Throne of Glass or Crescent City is purely because of that accessibility.
Yeah.
Right? Like first we're going to just dive into the characters across all three of these series, but ACOTAR in particular has two distinguishing factors that make it more bingeable and more impactful, I think, for most readers than any other series. And that is, one, it's written from the first person.
Hell yeah. That is such a big thing.
Two, actually I'm going to list three things. Second, our main character, Feyre, pretty generic girl, right?
Yes, compared to Aelin or Bryce, she's generic enough where
very easy to slot yourself into her shoes.
Yeah.
Third, the ACOTAR world, despite its epic scope, is still the smallest, most contained world of the three series.
Yeah.
It's, pretty easy to follow. 7 courts, and then the human lands, and
then
the
Hybern.
other Hybern. You never go to either of them for very long.
Mm-hmm.
So you're pretty much like in the night court, in the spring court, in the summer court, and that's it.
Yeah, it's very easy to keep track of because
super easy.
The conventions of the seasons and the times of day, like it's familiar to us. So it's relatively easy to ingest at the beginning and understand kind of like the situation of where you are. And then I think one of the reasons that Throne of Glass might be one of the things that brings people back into fantasy is if you are getting into it a little bit earlier, only because Throne of Glass started publication earlier, the series. So if you were like ahead of the curve, I'm sure there are like OG SJM fans out there who are like, I was reading SJM before, it was cool. And they probably started with Throne of Glass. And hey, if that's you,
kudos, mama.
Love that for you. You've just been living in this fantasy land for so much longer than all of us. And like, tell us how it's going. Tell us what to look forward to the next few years. Like, I want to know where my brain's going.
It's probably going to stay in Valeris, if we're being so honest.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, seeing as the worlds are, like we said, not groundbreaking, accessible, and we'll talk about that later, let's talk about the characters. Let's talk about the Who, because, like Natalie mentioned, the Who are really the things that set Sarah J Maas's books apart and make them so iconic to all of us. Like, starting with, if you're diving into ACOTAR, Feyre and the entire supporting cast of characters, you're like in this first person where you can like visualize everything through Feyre's perspective, and her characters make the series.
Yeah. Frankly, like, a lot of these books kind of read like anime a little bit. In the way that, yes, like the worlds are grand, there's magic, whatever, there's plot twists and turns, nothing crazy groundbreaking, but the characters are very caricaturized. Like, they have a certain set of qualities, and that's it. It helps you understand who they are immediately, and they don't really change that much, with the exception of a rare few. Those being like really the focal characters. Typically a Sarah J Maas plot will follow the character development of like 1 to 3 main characters having some sort of personal journey through the plot. Plot is obviously still, with the exception of Tower of Dawn, driving the story all the way through.
Yeah.
And the characters are growing in response to the things that happen in the plot. Their qualities and their characteristics and their personas are made so clear.
Very clear. They're clear. They're unique from each other, at least within one series. And the details about each character are repeated over and over to remind you. And then there's a point where you are essentially trained to recognize violet eyes. Oh, that's Rhysand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Pine and Snow.
That's going to be my baby's father, Rowan.
We're down so bad. We're down so bad for fictional men.
I mean, Sarah is the master of committing to the bit when it comes to her characters. She picks a pretty standard archetype. Like, I don't think any of these characters are anything that hasn't been done before. We have Grumpy and Sunshine dynamics. We have bad bitch main character who stops at nothing, and, you know, she's so tiny, but she's also a beast, you know, super powerful chosen one.
But she's
energy.
like 5'2".
Right. Then man whose job is protect his girl, and a smattering of side characters who are like sassy and loyal. That's really the collection.
Right.
You don't, and her villains, which I will complain about in a moment in more depth, but the exact same cartoon villain every single time.
And like, again, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If it worked in Throne of Glass, it's gonna work in ACOTAR, it's gonna work in Crescent City. Like, she's figured out a formula.
I complain about the villain every time I read a Sarah J Maas book, and yet I continue to read Sarah J Maas books.
Every single piece of paper with ink on it that she has signed off on and blessed, I will read.
Because, girl, it's fun.
Yep.
So what if the villain is like, I don't even have anything to compare them to that, like, it besides like Scooby-Doo villains. They have no motivation. They just like want to wreak havoc and be powerful for literally no reason. None of them have any homies or any bitches. They're just power hungry and mean for no reason, and they like they're so arrogant that every time at the end of the book they spill their entire plan to the main cast as if there's no way that the main cast is going to make it out alive. It's like
they're so sure
they're going to accomplish their goal and win, that they just monologue about what they were planning all along. And Sarah uses that as a plot crutch to patch up every single plot hole that she's created. Like, dude, can we be like slightly more creative next time? And then she never is, and I still read it anyway and love it, so whatever. Other characteristics beyond just like the caricaturized persona of these characters, also sort of like cartoon characters wearing the same outfit in every episode. We are reminded relentlessly, her characters have these absurdly recognizable scents and eye colors, and she's also just really good at writing interactions between characters beyond just dialogue, like really good at the facial expressions, the glances. Like, you can really picture these characters. It definitely helps that they're all described as being like unearthly levels of attractive.
That really does help. It also really hurts.
Yeah. As corny as it sounds, the eyes are the window to the soul. So being constantly reminded what someone's eyes look like and what they smell like and how their eyes are looking at certain characters really just hammers home the like emotional attachment factor.
Yeah. Also, Sarah was definitely a Danny Phantom fan.
Yeah. So we were talking about this last night. I don't know about y'all, but personally, and I am going to say this on God's internet because I don't care. I know y'all will relate, because if you are in the age group that's reading Sarah J Maas books, you were also sexually awakened by Danny Phantom. Okay? Look, I feel comfortable. This is a safe space, okay?
We can admit it to each other.
We can admit it to each other. My guy Danny Phantom was human and ghost, okay?
Dorian Havillard and Rowan Whitethorn. Be human so serious. And ghost.
He had human form, Dorian, black hair, blue eyes, chill guy, right? Then he has his ghost form, which is gray hair and bright green eyes.
Be so
like
serious.
Rowan, all right? So no wonder I'm flustered when reading Throne of Glass, especially in Empire of Storms when they both are getting spicy. I'm like, dude, Sarah.
I can't even think about it without blushing.
Sarah, I know you watched Danny Phantom.
100%.
Thank you.
She gets it. She knows. And she did fan service, honestly, giving us Dorian and Rowan in the same series. Mm-hmm. Absolutely overwhelming.
We have no choice but to stand.
Right.
Gnawing at the iron bars of my enclosure, as Brittany Broski likes to say.
I think the thing about all of Sarah J Maas's characters, when you encompass all of their physical attributes and their personalities that she's crafted so specifically and continues to remind us of, even through character development, like the main kind of core of who each character is personality-wise maintains itself. It's to the point where, like, Natalie and I were talking last night about what it would be like to go grocery shopping with these characters, and we pretty much kind of agreed on what they would buy, what it would be like to like walk the aisles of a grocery store with them. And it's kind of insane that an author can create characters that are so recognizable that different readers can like coalesce around what those characters would do in different situations. Like,
especially
we can agree.
Situations that wouldn't even apply in the world that they're in. Like, there aren't grocery stores in Throne of Glass. But if Aelin was at the grocery store, she would pick up a box of Lucky Charms and keep it moving.
Yeah. And then Rowan would go behind her and buy everything else that she didn't buy.
Correct.
All the real things.
She wrote the list, though.
Yeah. Rowan's got the list.
He's just the executor.
Right.
So, I mean, these characters just feel very real because they, again, like, they are benefited by the caricaturization and archetypal factors that created them. It just makes them feel more accessible.
Yeah.
You really understand who they're supposed to be.
You feel like
even
you know
if they're
them.
larger than life.
Mhm.
With the exception of like our real character study characters, Kale, Nesta, and I guess like I think Sarah's propositioning Ethan Holstrom to be the next Kale or Nesta. We'll see how that goes.
I just know that by saying Kale, like by putting Kale and Nesta together in this bucket, I feel like that's a hot take.
I mean, those are also the two most hated characters in the Sarah J Maas verse. It's just very funny to me knowing that there's people who love Nesta and hate Kale, or vice versa, or hate them both. Personally, they're my probably two favorite characters, not because of their stellar levels of attractiveness or their, despite them both being stellar levels of attractive.
Right, they're still hot.
It's the fact that they both, even though it was in a pretty corny manner, experienced trauma and then are coming out the other side of it renewed with a new sense of purpose and like true growth. They seem like the most human characters. Kale because he is, Nesta because she was, and still wants to be probably.
Yeah, she's still bitter about the fact that she's not human.
But I just think being able to spend really dedicated time with those characters throughout their own book and watch them grow after undergoing something really traumatic makes you feel closer to them. And they do a really good job of growing. They don't stay, bad. They don't stay down.
Right. And I think if the goal for Feyre, for example, is to allow readers to see themselves in her place, Nesta and Kale, while that may also apply to some people, like certain people may relate to certain parts of their journey, I think even not relating so deeply to them as characters, you can still very much appreciate the character arc and the journey that they go on. And I think that's part of why, even if you're not a huge fan of their personalities, like that doesn't necessarily in my mind mean that you should not read their books or not like the books that Sarah wrote about them. You just have to kind of like step back and look at it from a slightly more objective place, and realize that you're not going to relate to everything Nesta thinks. Like she's an angry, spiteful person who lashes out at people who show her kindness because she doesn't think she deserves the kindness. And if you don't relate to that, it's going to be very, very hard to sit in her head for that long and watch her do that and watch her self-sabotage and watch Cassian like keep coming back to her.
And I mean, same with Kale.
Right.
I feel like a lot of people don't like him because of the way that he would lash out at Aelin throughout Queen of Shadows. And I don't know if that's entirely like valid because, listen, first of all, Kale is in love with Dorian.
Kale and Dorian are the couple that never was. Cutest couple that never was.
Kiss already. We know you want to. And he's just like really flustered and being torn apart by the fact that his bestie is being held prisoner in his own body. Yeah.
Kale is dealing with the fact that he is just a human. He is just a boy in a group of friends between Dorian, Aelin, and then all of the people that they bring into his orbit that are extremely powerful. They're all extremely powerful. Once you bring Rowan and then Lysandra and Manon and like all of these fae creatures, he's just like, where does that leave me? And he is just concerned at their unchecked power, and their power levels off the freaking Richter scale. And he questions them. And because of that, because everyone's like Team Aelin all the time, anyone who questions her like automatically gets hate. Like, I just think it's a real concern. If like you were to try to sympathize with being in that situation, which is difficult because unfortunately for us, none of those other characters are real. And I think it would be a pretty reasonable kind of response to be a little nervous about having so many best friends with so much power.
Also, like, Aelin was gonna kill Dorian.
It's really sad.
She was. And he has every right to be upsetty spaghetti about that, even if Dorian is being held prisoner and, like, wasn't there anymore. Like, that, she went against the one thing he asked her to do. So, of course he's going to be upset. And I don't think that we should give him any flack for having a human response to something that the, like, completely unchecked ruler of this group is doing.
Yeah, look, Kale, like, showed up to work every single day as captain of the guard and just kind of, like, walked around and performatively made sure, like, everything was fine for the longest time. And then Aelin showed up and the world basically turned upside down. Like, he's just being thrown for multiple loops.
And then he got an earth-shattering back injury.
That part.
Became crippled even further. He was already human and powerless, and now he's in a wheelchair. He's like, what the fuck do I do now?
Yeah.
Plus, all of his men got murdered and slung up on the gates. Like, this man has been through it.
Yeah,
How
and
can
anyone-
you hate on him? He's still kind. He's still a nice person, and he's trying his best. What is there to hate about him? He's also sexy. What are you talking about? God, I did not appreciate Kale's attractiveness until Tower of Dawn, but I'm like, oh my.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's good.
Okay, Lord Westfall.
Lord Westfall. Screaming. Oh my god. Okay, so, like, on the topic of all of these characters' personalities and what they're like and what we think it would be like to hang out with them.
We're just gonna have a little fun for a second.
Right.
Indulge
So,
us in this.
we're gonna go through every single character that is of importance and basically shoot the shit about what their sun sign is. Right? Feyre, we know. She's a Sag. She's winter solstice. She's, like, right there cusp between Sagittarius and Capricorn, but she's most definitely a Sagittarius.
She's the only one who we, like, know for a fact what her birthday is. So,
Right.
Yeah. Feyre is a Sag. We know this because of her birthday. I don't know if I would classify her as a Sag if we didn't know that. Like, what else would she be?
I don't know.
I think just because we know, it feels like right. We're like, of course.
Yeah, I can't.
But again,
I can't
as we
hypothesize.
said, like, Feyre is has such a generic personality that she could kind of, like, be anything.
Right. Nesta, on the other hand, she's not generic at all.
No. Nesta is very, very stubborn, lazy at times, gets very pissed off at everyone, and as a fellow Taurus woman, real recognize real. Nesta is a Taurus. I know one when I see one.
Elaine, we went back and forth a little bit on Elaine when we were postulating what she could possibly be. We landed on Pisces, mainly because she's kind of, like, undecided about where she's going to fall on a lot of things, but she's also emotional.
Very aloof, but also somehow clued into things. Head in the clouds. Yeah, Pisces, for sure.
Yeah.
Rhysand. Our
man.
shadow daddy is a Libra, without a shadow of a doubt.
Okay, as a Libra, I'm a September Libra. I think Rhys is like a late October Libra. Like, he is heading into Scorpio. He's got some, like, shadow Scorpio influence.
He puts the Scorpio face on when he goes to the Court of Nightmares.
Right, exactly.
But he is a Libra to the inner circle.
Right, exactly. So, like, when he shows up to the Hewn City, he's like, this is my Scorpio cusp coming out. And then he goes home to Feyre and he's like
balanced, fair, and kind.
Soft Libra man.
Yeah.
We love.
Cassian.
Straight up Aries.
Aries. Duh.
Obviously.
Azriel. Aquarius.
Yeah, he is a solid Aquarius man.
I totally agree. Again, we have a secondary Taurus woman, and that is going to be the Morrigan. Again, stubborn, knows what she wants, still kind, a different flavor of Taurus woman. I would say Mor is an April Taurus, Nesta is an April Taurus, Mor is a May Taurus.
Natalie's an April Taurus.
Yes, I am. Imran is a Scorpio. No explanation needed.
She's intense and she's scary.
Last but not least, we have Tamlin, who is, if you looked up what a Cancer man was in the dictionary, that's going to be a picture of Tamlin right there.
Yep, that's Tim Tam.
Throne of Glass.
Aelin, also the most Aries that ever did Aries.
Correct.
Just, there's nothing else that makes sense for her.
Yep.
She literally has fire magic.
And she's unpredictable, all over the place, bullish, brash. Slay.
Rowan is a Capricorn.
Rowan is for sure a Capricorn. Very grounded, stubborn, hardworking, loyal.
And what does he work hard at? His job? Aelin.
Exactly. Precisely.
Yeah.
Our baby Aedion is a Gemini. Now, Claudia seems to think that is a resultant of his behavior in Kingdom of Ash, which, as we've mentioned, I have yet to read. So I'm going to just take her word for it.
Yes.
On that. Lysandra, our shape-shifting queen, that's obviously also going to be an Aquarius.
Straight Aquarius.
For sure.
Dorian, again, Shadow Daddy, very, very, nice, put together on the outside, very intense on the inside. He's got a lot of depth. Scorpio. Manon, his love interest, also a Scorpio. 2 Scorpios living.
Yes.
Love that for them.
My baby Kale, he's also a Cancer, but in a much softer and kinder way than Tamlin's Cancer. Tamlin's Cancer is like his emotional reaction is anger and possessiveness, whereas Kale's is self-loathing. Irene,
such a Libra
woman.
Irene is just out here trying to help everybody. She's saying yes to everybody who needs help. I have never met a more Libra character in my life. Lorcan,
same flavor of Cancer as Tamlin.
Yeah.
He's very emotional, but in a very angry way. When he's sad, anger.
There's a lead.
A lead. I don't know. I read Elliday. She read a lead. It does not matter at all.
You know what?
We couldn't even pick a sign for this bitch because she has no personality.
I really don't know. I really cannot fathom her personality well enough to give her a sun sign. So if you have ideas, like, please let us know. But she's just there. What I think is funny is everybody loves her. Manon is like,
that's my baby.
Right, that's my baby. Aelin is like, that's my childhood bestie. Lorcan's like, I don't know what I'm feeling, but it's not anger. And then eventually he realizes that, I kind of like her. Everyone wants to take care of her and make sure she's all right.
I don't get it, y'all. They didn't give her compelling and here's my take on it. Sarah cranked up the trauma meter on her, gave her like a broken ankle and locked her in dungeons for a lot of her life and gave her no magic and made her this like pathetic, sympathetic character
who's like a little bit witch.
Who's a little
but
bit
not enough to
witch,
make it consequential, really.
And has like sass, also is illiterate, please. But like didn't give her enough wherewithal to like really be crafty or have a compelling personality. She's just like this pathetic thing that needs to be taken care of, and I felt nothing about her.
She will have a moment in Kingdom of Ash, and that's all I will say. However, the moment involves Lorcan, and I feel relatively not attached to Lorcan compared to the way I feel about all the other characters, so I'm just like, okay.
Last but not least, we have our Crescent City cast. We'll rumble through these relatively quickly. I also realized we left out Therian because obviously
he's also a Cancer.
Yeah, he can also be a Cancer. Therian and Ethan, will get those off right off the bat. Cancers.
So Cancer.
Also Cancers, which makes sense considering we had Kale as the original what Ethan is planned to be, I believe.
Right.
They're
and kind
Therian
of analogous.
In the next Crescent City installment.
Yeah, they're analogous characters across the series.
And listen, if they get the Kale treatment, I'll be happy.
Right. If we get a narrative where Ethan goes on a journey, a self-discovery character development journey that resembles Kale,
that isn't about like some random fucking Fender heir. Like, I need his actual personal journey.
Ditch the Fender heir. Yeah, he can't be like going after all these distractions to try and avoid the fact that like he has to work on himself. He needs to do the work.
Same with Therian. This man keeps bopping around from court to court trying to find purpose and like comes up empty every time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let these men work on themselves. I want a book of them just going to therapy together.
Which, to be honest, Crescent City is the only series of hers that has actual therapy. So like,
maybe we'll get therapy. Who knows?
All right, Miss Bryce.
That's gonna be a Sagittarius right there. Bryce and Aelin are very similar, but Aelin is an Aries because she's turbulent yet calculated. She plans everything out. She's 10 steps ahead at all times, which can be very annoying as a reader, but works when we need plot holes patched up.
That Miss Ma'am has a Virgo rising.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
Virgo rising. Bryce, however, all over the place. Fuck around and find out. She's very resolved in her beliefs. And I think that's very Sagittarius of her.
Nothing about her, any astrological sign in any part of her personality is near Virgo with a 10-foot pole.
No. Hunt is just basically Rowan 2.0, so he's also a Capricorn.
Straight Cap.
My baby's father, Rune, is also a Libra, much like his supposed relative, Rhysand.
Yeah. The Libras are really serving.
Lydia is a Scorpio.
She's intense, and she's a bad bitch, and she knows it.
Very much so. Flynn, Gemini.
Yeah.
Our computer fairy, Declan, Virgo, maybe?
Maybe. I feel like you would need a lot of tenacity to hack into things. And he's
Plus,
very loyal.
Every Virgo man I know is gay. So that makes sense.
This revelation has really hit me hard. Same. Hypaxia, our witch queen.
Taurus woman.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
And then Miss Jessica, who was a human turned immortal and is just absolutely take no shit. She is basically the Amaran personality of Crescent City. She's a Scorpio.
Yes. Now we're gonna circle back to the villain conversation.
Yes.
Sarah J Maas's villains are all the same, and they're terrible. They are Scooby-Doo villains. They are like, I would have gotten away with it if it weren't for you meddling kids.
Long monologues at the end.
They just like do chaotic, monstrous things for literally
just for
no
power.
reason.
Power to have power, for power's sake.
Why does Maeve want to live forever and be powerful?
Why does Hybern want more than he has?
Hybern got no wife, no friends.
He's got a cauldron.
Maeve just has like a bunch of hot guys running around doing stuff for her. The Asteri just want to be fed.
Okay, I do get that, but they're being a little greedy now. They're just
like, we could have come to some sort of like bartering agreement with them, but no, they just conquested everything.
They just decided to suck the life force out of every single planet.
Right.
Casual.
Micah,
so they're just
why was Micah evil?
Well, Micah was just trying to get on the Asteri's good side. Micah was a pawn villain because remember Regulus
yes, but,
was
it's so stupid. Like, what are the Asteri gonna do for you, dog?
They promise things that they're never gonna deliver.
He's already a governor. What more is there for him?
I don't know. He just hated Danica and was like, she's getting too close to the truth. And the Asteri played him.
True.
The Asteri played into his
that's fair.
arrogance to make him do things that they wanted. And then he ended up being a villain because of it.
Nope, that's fair. I will agree with you on that one.
And then we also have, like, I wouldn't call them minor villains, but villains that get either eliminated earlier in a series
like
or
Micah, it's also Amarantha.
Yeah.
It's just like a pawn of Hybern. She
Right.
didn't want anything except to have sex with Rhys. So, and Tamlin.
Understandable.
Just like Feyre, for real.
She was just a bitch about it, and Feyre was just a teeny weeny little human.
Oh man. Now we've got like maybe a new villain on the horizon. In Silver Flames, the villain was Feyre's baby.
Be so serious.
It was also I don't even remember his
Briarlyn.
fucking name. Well, the queen, yeah, but
And Koshai, the death god.
I mean, he'll circle back around in the
He
next
definitely
ACOTAR
will.
installment for sure. He's being set up as the next one, but like, who was that? Like Emery's cousin or whatever that tried to kill them on the mountain.
Oh, didn't he also die?
Yeah,
I forget his name.
yeah.
But he sucked.
He was like also monologuing about how like they shouldn't be powerful because they're women. Anyways,
Yeah, that one was funny. That one was like Briarlyn used him as a puppet villain, but then she was also like a villain, but she was also kind of a puppet villain.
plus there was like Cain dead in first Throne of Glass book. Arabin dead.
Arabin, that was so bad.
Fuck that guy. And even the King of Adarlan was a temporary villain.
Right.
We've just been cycling through these same temporary villains, and I will forgive the King of Adarlan because his meaningless power-hungry shell was actually not him. It was the Valg. So really, we're only hating on two meaningless villains. We have, well, Arabin, I will forgive. Arabin at least was complex. He just was like weirdly obsessed with Aelin.
Right. We're not forgiving his behavior. We're forgiving the fact that he's not like all the other villains.
Yeah,
he's
not
worse.
as cookie cutter.
He's worse.
He's worse. Yeah, he just was
Disgusting.
Wow, gross, horrible man.
Really made me want to like lean over the side of my bed and like vomit on the ground.
Yeah, he made my skin crawl in every fathomable way.
And reading Assassin's Blade just makes it hurt so much more.
Yeah. He just wanted to make Aelin basically his slave and just was waiting for the day when she would realize, like Taylor Swift You Belong With Me style, that he was right there all along. Even though she was a child. Anyways.
Thank God she went and found Rowan and showed up to his dinner party finally with this.
Had Lysandra slit his damn throat. Point being, Arobynn, slightly more complex than the other villains. I think we've beaten a dead horse with the characters. Let's get into the plot. What makes Sarah J Maas plots tick, despite them really not doing anything that out of the box?
Right. Her magic systems are nothing we haven't seen in similar forms. Her worlds, every fantasy book has a map in the front, and, you know, ACOTAR, for one, looks like Great Britain.
Which, again, like, that's why it's so accessible. Like, you can really picture the geography and the scale of everything. Yeah.
And there's nothing groundbreaking in enemies to lovers as a, you know, subplot in most of these books.
For God's sake, the first ACOTAR book, A Court of Thorns and Roses, that's just a Beauty and the Beast retelling with a twist.
Yes, it literally, the vibes are like Beauty and the Beast retelling up until Tamlin sends Feyre away.
Yeah.
Then
it's Under the Mountain.
Then Under the Mountain is Hunger Games, basically. But it's like the part of the Hunger Games where the tributes are competing for scores before they're competing against each other. And then the very, very, very end, where she gets turned into High Fae, is like the ending of Breaking Dawn Part 1 in the Twilight series, where Bella opens her eyes and she's a vampire. So like that, so true. That is my progression of A Court of Thorns and Roses, like proper that book.
Yeah. And Sarah is really the expert of cranking up the stakes every book. Like,
yes.
The worlds expand throughout all the series in every book. With ACOTAR, though, it still stays relatively contained. Like, we don't really ever go beyond the map that's in the front of the ACOTAR book. We're on Prythian, the Great Britain continent. We go from the Mortal Lands to the Spring Court to Under the Mountain. Then the next book, we reach the Night Court. Tiny bit of Highburn, which is on a different continent. And then in Wings and Ruin, we get information from more of the Mortal Lands, but we don't ever go there. Azrael goes there in secret, but like Feyre doesn't. We're still in her head.
Right, of course.
And then all of Silver Flames takes place in the Night Court. So,
and we just hear that more is somewhere else in another country, which I forget exactly where, because we haven't fully seen that plot come to fruition. It was just a way to get her out of the way and hopefully set something up for future books.
And as we saw in House of Flame and Shadow, the entire gang is in the Night Court still.
Yeah, they're just chilling. Yeah. Then Bryce just poof appears. So yeah, the world it's digestible. It is unlike Crescent City, where the first 100 pages are an insane amount of world building, and like it's become almost comical to joke about what it's like to try and keep up with the world building in Crescent City. The world building in ACOTAR is very, very easy. That's it. It's easy.
And the plots are, again, every trope in the book. We have quests for a magical object. We have the enemies to lovers. We have elemental magic. We have no new inventions came out of any of these books.
Right. We have lesser fairies and high fairies. And
we have demons and shifters. And, you know, Sarah J Maas didn't reinvent the wheel.
What she does really well is not only building tension between her characters, because if you think about it, like Rhys and Feyre spend an entire book going from enemies to friends to lovers. So she's building this tension, and it doesn't crest until obviously 54, 55 chapters in. And so not only is she really good at doing that with her characters, she's really good at doing that with her plots as well. She'll like progressively build a little bit at a time, so there's always tension, and so you're always like, okay, now what?
She's really the queen of the 7 plot point structure. there's always highs and lows that build in intensity, right? As we go throughout not only the books, but the series as a whole. She's very, very good at crafting an addicting and easy to expect plot structure. Like, you know, based on where you are in the book, what you're expecting, not necessarily to happen next in terms of like actually the actions that happen, but how they're going to make you feel. It can expect you're going to go up the roller coaster, have a small dip, then tick back up, and then have another dip, and then tick all the way up and have a gigantic, in the last 150 pages,
right,
adrenaline rush.
Yeah. It's predictable enough where, like, you know, you can tell once you've read a couple of Sarah J Maas books when you're about to cross that threshold of no return into that final big drop. And you can
horizon.
Yeah, the event horizon. And you can make an informed decision. Am I in a place right now where I can A, emotionally take it, B, spend the remainder of the hours necessary in this one place finishing this book? Because once you cross that event horizon,
you can't put it away.
You can't put it down. And I mean, that's
happened
again
to me last week. It happened to me last week reading Empire of Storms. I was on chapter 45, which is a safe distance away from the end of the book.
Right. So Natalie's probably thinking to herself, "Oh, I'll just read a few chapters." But then, like, she approached the event horizon.
I accidentally crossed the event horizon, and I did spend the hours of 8 p.m. to 1 a.m. finishing the entire rest of the book on a Tuesday night.
Yeah.
So, and I was so pissed off at the ending that I could not sleep for another hour.
I remember that happening to me when I was reading A Court of Wings and Ruin. I crossed the event horizon and I was just like, I gotta keep going. And then obviously page 666 ripped my heart out, and like everybody in my household was asleep, and I couldn't even like have a visceral reaction because I was like, I gotta be quiet. So I was like having an internal emotional breakdown. And then when I read Silver Flames, by the time I got to part 4, I was like, I am going to make an informed decision right now, and I'm going to read this tomorrow.
Yep.
And that is called growth. That is called growth. And that is called adulting.
That is called character development. Speaking of page 666 of A Court of Wings and Ruin.
Yeah.
What is with these convenient resurrections? Sarah, what are we doing? Why must we do this every time? At the absolute crest of every series, at the very end, we are constantly barraged with these main characters dying and then being brought back to life. Why are they dying in the first place if they're just going to get brought back? For what?
So fair. Just to pull on emotional heartstrings, I guess.
I mean, in House of Flame and Shadow, we had Bryce dying, which was not cool. Although she traded places with Jessica right away, and I liked the scene where she like got to see Danica and Connor in the like good place, basically.
And Lahaba.
So like fair, I guess, but also just why? I was like, as it was happening, I was like, no, not this again. Because like, love, as much as we love these characters, we've talked ad nauseum about how much we love them. I want them to live. I want them to be happy ever after.
Yeah.
But it's just like the thrill and the stakes are gone if they're just gonna come back right away. Like Rhysand, I didn't want him to die, but like, did Amryn have to come back too? Love her, but like, she did her thing. She self-sacrificed. She was like supposed to kind of be gone, and Rhysand just like dragged her back through the cauldron. Hopefully she has purpose in a later book, because otherwise I'm like, why did she come back? It would have been more impactful if she was just dead.
Yeah. And maybe it has to do with the Crescent City crossover, because she's the only one old enough to remember back to the time of the Asteri. So, like, she comes in a little bit of handy with that knowledge, but without the power. Remember, she's Rhys's second. So, like, and she's Rhys's second because she's got so much power that is completely unforeseen in the ACOTAR world. But then she unleashes herself. She like peters out and then comes back as like just the human shell of her body. So she's nothing but her knowledge at that point.
Yeah. Oh man.
Anyway, Natalie hasn't read Kingdom of Ash, so we will revisit
I know
this.
There's some permanent deaths coming for me. I know that, and I'm scared because I'm so emotionally attached to the characters.
And the thing about Kingdom of Ash as a book, it serves the function to the series at large that the last 150 pages of any Sarah J Maas book serve to, like, a contained book. And that entire thing, the ending of every single chapter in Kingdom of Ash honestly feels like a cliffhanger where you're like, I gotta keep going. It's so intense how she grips you in that one.
It's the cliffhanger effect, really, that makes it so bingeable. Like, she does these crazy things to these characters, and you just have to keep going to find out if they're gonna be okay. And a lot of times, they're gonna be fine.
Yes.
But sometimes, apparently, they're not.
Yeah, we'll have to revisit this conversation once.
Claudia's been really good at not giving me any hints because whenever I mention stuff, I try to read her face and I can't figure out what she's thinking.
Natalie's also been really good at staying off the internet, and so I've been like screenshotting spoiler-free fan art and sending it to her when she requests.
I've been trying really, really hard to, because there's nothing worse than spoiling the end of, oh man, I really just don't want to know. I want my heart to be ripped out, but I know that obviously Rowan and Aelin are going to be fine. So,
and I think it was so easy in ACOTAR to accidentally spoil things for yourself because you go on the internet and then you're like, when you're reading the first book and you're like, why is there no Feyre and Tamlin fan art? Why is it all Feyre and Rhys? And then you're just like,
right.
Oh,
right.
So
that part.
we learned our lesson.
Also, the marriage is off the page. Just why are we doing that?
I've heard that Sarah just has said in interviews that she does not like writing wedding scenes. But why does everybody have to get married like in secret from literally everybody else?
Right.
Like, can't we do like a fade to black wedding scene where it's like we're gathered here and then it just cuts?
That would be fun. I just I don't like them surprisingly being married. Although it really hit. I had to read the sentence like 4 times at the end of Empire of Storms when Rowan's like, "Where's my wife?" I was like, metaphorically speaking,
like the way we talk about that's my baby's father.
Yeah,
like,
I was like, that's strange.
The thing is, every time that happens, and like this happened in Crescent City as well, where Hunt refers to Bryce as his wife, I'm like, did I miss something? I'm like, where did I accidentally, like, did I get a book that was missing chapters? Or like, am I forgetting something? Am I the idiot?
And then at the end of Mist and Fury, Rhys is like, well, your High Lady is now stuck in the Spring Court. So, and everyone's like, excuse me?
Yeah. And then Cassian and Azriel are like, this is actually not good because if we had known she was our High Lady, like we would have protected her differently. Yeah. They're like, Rhys, you kind of fucked us over.
You flopped.
All right, let's talk about the difference between Sarah's worlds across her different series, because we've talked about how ACOTAR is the most accessible one just because of its scope and its relative familiarity in terms of like how the courts are defined and the geography. Then we got Throne of Glass, which is obviously it's her longest series so far. It's complete and it is the biggest world, I think.
Yeah, it at least takes place over an entire hemisphere of a planet, if not the entire planet. We don't really know, but there's 3 different continents that are all explored in at least like a decent amount of depth.
Yeah.
We get, very thorough exploration of the main continent, Aurelia, I don't know. And then there's the southern continent and there's Wendland. And all 3 of them, we get like decent exploration and description of them all, but it makes the world a lot bigger, and definitely you gotta refer to the map from time to time because there's a lot of names. And
as such, we have a large cast of characters by the time we get to the very end. Like what starts as Kaol, Dorian, and Selena in the beginning, like
I can't
rapidly
even think of her as Selena.
I know, isn't that unserious? Rapidly expands into a group of just many more hotties by the end. And then we have Crescent City, which, if I'm being completely honest, Crescent City feels like the melting pot of every single type of fantastical creature being that did not neatly fall into anything within the confines of the ACOTAR world or the Throne of Glass worlds.
Yeah.
And Sarah was just like, I'm gonna put this on a list somewhere and I'll come back to it. And then she pulled out that list and said, it's all going in Crescent City, all of it.
Someone said, Sarah, what fantastical creatures do you want to include in this book? And she said, yes.
Precisely.
Yeah. Enough said. But Crescent City is kind of strange in terms of scope, just because a lot of it does take place in Crescent City proper, which is the smallest of all 3 of the worlds. However, we also have Bryce going through the rift, going to Prithian, so that expands the world to another planet. Then they go to Hell, expanding to another planet.
Yeah, in their minds, but still counts.
There's the ALLLL exploration. There's, traveling.
They're at the bottom of the ocean for a little bit.
They're going here, there, and everywhere for momentary blips of time. And the city itself is very rich and diverse. We have all the different sections of the city. It doesn't feel like it's one city. It feels much bigger than that.
There's lots of neighborhoods. There's a lot of diversity in terms of creatures. And it's not just like in ACOTAR where you have the Fae and then like lesser fairy type creatures like the Bog and the Naga and like all these other things, the Ator and like all those gross things. There's also like fire sprites and vampires, and you have like this basically the entire dictionary of fantastical creatures, and
spilled it all.
Yeah, just used it all. I have never met anyone who's read Crescent City
and not been
and not ACOTAR or Throne of Glass, honestly.
Also that.
Yeah,
it's definitely a more intimidating world, not for the faint of heart or the uneducated on the workings of Sarah J MAAS.
However, even though it is intimidating, what Sarah has done really well, and like what has kept her readers coming back series after series, is the fact that she has created the Maasverse, which is not just to say that she has all these books and we love them all. It's to say that they are literally all connected. All of her worlds have links to each other. And it was like the most genius way to get people to read Crescent City, to throw all of those explanations into the most recent Crescent City book, because
so you have to read the first 2 and then you have to read the third to get your Azriel and Nesta content.
Right, exactly. It's like if you want to understand how, if you want more Rhysand at the moment and you're done with all of ACOTAR, if you want a little more Rhysand, you have to read Crescent City. You have to get to Bryce jumping through the rift and ending up on Rhys's front lawn, staring up into the eyes of Azriel. I don't think that's a terrible reason to read 1,600 pages of literature.
No, it's great.
So all that to say, Sarah J MAAS has created this network effect, right? It's like what Apple's done. You own one Apple product, you have to own them all because they're all connected. And if you're a Taylor Swift fan, and she drops Easter eggs all the damn time. Sarah's done the same thing. If you read her series, like she's dropped Easter eggs about how they connect to each other, especially in Crescent City. And I live for those moments. It's the little connections that like make your blood hum. You're like, oh my God.
And that's what all of the discourse online on Book Talk and BookTube and Bookstagram, like that's what people talk about, is their crack theories about what's coming next based on the crumbs that were fed throughout the original books.
Yeah.
And
she's given us these clues, and it gives the fandom like fodder to keep talking about her even when she's not releasing anything new for the foreseeable future, right? We've got at least a year until we get our next book, and we will not shut up for the next year.
And same with Taylor Swift between albums. I mean, the comparison between the two of them is really a poignant one. Like, they have so many similarities. They're both masters of their craft, prolific in their industry, but also, like, neither of them is doing something that's, like, completely unforeseen or experimental. Like, they cater to the masses, but they're experts at it. They're so good at making music and literature that people crave, binge, can't stop listening to. There's an addictive factor in Taylor Swift's music and in Sarah J MAAS's writing that just gets people hooked and keeps them hooked. And this smattering of Easter egg dropping, crack theory fodder, it keeps people talking about the content, and speculating on what's next keeps them coming back to you. And that's how you build a fucking empire, okay?
Yeah.
These two women are geniuses, and I don't see how anybody could look at them and say, you know, that comparison to Taylor Swift being a bad thing, unless you just like are a misogynist, and you, even if you hate her music, you gotta give her the fact that she's a completely self-made billionaire based on music alone. Sarah J Maas, same thing. She doesn't do fucking sponsorships. She's an author, for Christ's sake.
Sarah J Maas has like 3 apps on her phone and like doesn't like commune with the outside world half the time, and she's still the most popular author of current times. Be serious.
And I think they both cater to similar audiences for both all of the factors we just mentioned, but also like the timing of their fame is really important to consider, because I feel like Sarah J Maas is catering to an audience of people like myself and Claudia, who are in their mid-20s, who graduated college within the last like 5 to 10 years, and we're really into the 2010s dystopian YA craze.
Yeah.
And now that we're coming back to reading, and there's all of this organic hype on TikTok and on the internet talking about these books, it appeals to that same kind of thing where like the fun of reading those dystopian books in 2010 was like there was lots of content being made about them. There was movies.
Could talk about it with
people.
You
could talk about it with people.
Mm-hmm. It was something to have in common.
The great equalizer.
Yeah. And I think one of the recent...
people are still talking about it.
Yeah, that's
Harry
so true.
Potter is a $1 billion franchise.
Still. Yeah.
Percy Jackson was just remade again.
Yeah.
It came out like, what, 15, 20 years ago? People eat it up. It has a lasting factor, and this is just like the second coming of that for the same audience that grew up reading that and is now grown up and is looking for the adult version.
Right. And the first ACOTAR book, I might get this wrong, but just approximately came out in like, I want to say 2015, something like that. Throne of Glass even earlier. So Sarah J Maas was not like this massive big deal like right off the bat. But the rise of book talk specifically, like she became like the biggest thing in fantasy book talk. And so there was this whole movement around reading, which I think was honestly driven a lot by the pandemic. Like we were all at home with not a lot to do.
Totally.
And everything was shut down and everybody wanted to escape really freaking bad, you know? And so reading became an escape for so many people.
And let me tell you, these worlds are the place to go.
Yeah. And so as people were leaning into reading, all of these books that were out there became like reignited, and all of the Harry Potter fans and Twilight fans and Hunger Games fans and Divergent fans, like we were all like, oh, this scratches the itch. And there's a newcomer in that group where now we've got Fourth Wing, Rebecca Yarros, Fourth Wing Iron Flame, and Fourth Wing came out last May 2023, something like that, I think. And now that is also becoming one of the new gateway drugs, if you will. There are some people now who are getting back into reading who are reading that first and then ACOTAR, which when Natalie and I read ACOTAR, Fourth Wing wasn't out yet. So we went into the ACOTAR world just because that was the gateway drug. Now there's an option. Now you can get some dragons as your gateway drug if you like.
Would have loved that as my gateway drug, honestly, but it makes sense because it has the same formula, right? It's enemies to lovers with Violet, who she's very Feyre in that.
Yeah.
She's, got the odds stacked against her, and then all of a sudden is like the most powerful, special, perfect angel baby ever, and she also happens to catch the eye of the king shadow daddy of this world.
I am down so bad for Xaden Ryerson. It's really unhealthy. I had 2 friends recently who read Fourth Wing and are reading Iron Flame, and one of them, she texted me out of the blue, and she was like, I started reading this book. She didn't tell me which one it was at first. She was like, I started reading this book and I get it now. She goes, I get why you carry a book with you literally everywhere. And I said, what book? And she goes, Fourth Wing. I said, yep, that'll do
that
it.
Part. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, it makes sense. It's the same formula. It's that character dynamic, that relationship dynamic, enemies to lovers, fantastical setting, dragon college. I mean, There was a million. You had Harry Potter based out of school. You had Camp Half-Blood in Percy Jackson.
Yeah. And a lot of room for crack theories. Again,
So
things to keep people talking. What is Violet's second signet? What's going to happen with Xaden? I won't say anymore because we didn't preface this with a spoiler warning. But, and again, with very recognizable features. Xaden has gold-flecked onyx eyes.
Come on, dude.
That is the longest description of a set of eyes I've ever heard. And I will say it every single time. Because that's so unrealistic, but so hot. And I think the other thing that ACOTAR and... Well, I know you weren't talking about ACOTAR, but another thing that ACOTAR and Fourth Wing have in common is that they're both getting made into TV series. And I think for both of those, it's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of pressure for these producers.
You have tens of millions of fans who are expecting... something
insane
that they may not be able to deliver.
Well, and if you think about all the fan casting that has happened, all of the fan art that has been made, and like there's a lot of AI generated fan art, so by definition, like that's not real. That is essential. It's animated.
And I've been saying this, and I will die on this hill. Let's just not even bother with making any of these books into a live action. We've seen what happened to Avatar: The Last Airbender, my child, okay? I literally have a tattoo for that show. And they keep ruining it by trying to make it live action. It's supposed to be animated. It works as an animated series because you can get away with doing crazy stuff that can't happen in the real world. In an animated series, you can get away with it really well.
Yeah.
You can have characters with perfectly symmetrical faces and hair that falls perfectly onto their forehead.
Y'all,
you can have perfect elemental magic and choreographed fight scenes that like look flawless. You can't do that in live action. And I'm going to say this extremely loud for the people in the back. There is not, and I repeat, there is not a single person alive, no actor on this earth, who can successfully portray Rhysand. And that's purely because there is not a man on this earth hot enough to be Rhysand. There just isn't. I'm going to be disappointed no matter who the fuck they get to play him. I'm going to be upset.
Yeah.
I'm going to be upset.
By definition, fairies are hotter than humans. You cannot take an actor and make him Rhysand.
Also, like, they're gonna fuck up the ears. And it's gonna
the
piss me off really bad.
Y'all, if they
the
don't...
Batwings
if the
can flop
Batwings
so
look
hard.
stupid, I am going to riot in the streets. Yeah. I'm gonna go on strike.
I mean, they might be able to get away with doing Fourth Wing because they're humans, so they're not described as being like unearthly levels of attractive, although like Xaden is supposed to be like the most perfect human specimen ever,
right? A 23-year-old who just like happens to be 6'3", looks like he's 35 and goes to the gym every day. Yeah, right. Be serious.
Yes. So but like, come on, we just, it's not gonna work, and it's not going to have the charm that it should if we try to force it to be live action. The fan art and my own headcanon has just completely ruined my expectations. And like, there's rumors of like Jacob Elordi maybe playing Rhysand. He's not hot enough.
Look, I love Jacob Elordi. I think he's extremely hot. He's not hot enough to be Rhysand.
Kale Westfall, maybe.
Yeah, I could see that.
But he could not play Rhysand. Okay, nobody can play
Kale
Rhysand.
is a human.
Not even Henry Cavill. I don't want to hear that. Nobody. There's no one. Okay? Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
On that note.
Yeah. ACOTAR animated series, please. ACOTAR live action series, cancel it. Just pull the plug before it's too late. Because I will riot in the streets. I will watch every episode, but I will also riot in the streets.
Right. Like, we'll consume it because addicted. Because drugs.
We're literally going to have an Avatar M. Night Shyamalan situation on our hands. And I can't watch them do that to it. Like, I've already had one baby murdered. I can't have it again. It's just...
this is going to be an ongoing topic.
We're going to have a full Throne of Glass episode and a full like dedicated ACOTAR plot gush episode somewhere along the line.
We will be revisiting Sarah J Maas. Look, our bestie circle of people who are in the Maasverse is growing because we are disciples of Sarah J Maas, and we go out spreading the good news, and we show up on doorsteps, metaphorically speaking.
No, we are literally like in a multi-level marketing scheme for this woman, completely uncompensated.
And as the circle grows, we love, because it's something that the more people read it, the more people you have to talk about it with. I teach fitness classes, and like every so often I will like mention like reading, and so many people will be like, oh, I've read ACOTAR, and then they just become besties. And isn't that the joy of this? Isn't that the beauty? Isn't that all we're trying to do in this world, is find things we have in common with other people and become besties because of it,
and create a somewhat cultish environment.
All part of tomato.
With that, that's gonna do it for our episode. Again, thanks for joining. We love Sarah J Maas, despite her clear Swiss cheese plots at times. And we will read every word she writes, and we'll report back to you on it.
Yes. Follow us on Instagram, follow us on TikTok, wherever you're listening. Favorite us, bookmark us,
rate us 5 stars on Spotify, give our video a thumbs up,
whatever it is, whatever platform you're on, however you can engage, do it, because it's free for you to do, period. All right, Natalie, what are we talking about next time?
So yeah, we're trying to stay a little bit liquid in terms of our schedule, and just kind of give the people fan service as we can. And so in light of the Dune movie recently blowing the fuck up, by the way, if you haven't seen the Dune movie, go watch it in IMAX ASAP. It is a masterpiece. We are going to be discussing the first book in the Dune series, which is the plot that encompasses the first and second Dune movie,
which Natalie has read.
I read it in 2020. It was actually the very first book that I picked up getting back out of my reading slump, and I absolutely loved it. Instant classic for me. It's so good. The world building is absolutely top of the line. So we're very excited to unpack that. Claudia's never read it. It's going to be a blast. So join us next episode for that. And then our second episode in April is going to be about one of my favorite books of all time. We're really going ham with the world building exploration in April. Priory of the Orange Tree is going to be our second April episode. One of my absolute favorite books of all time, and I think best world building that I have ever read in my life.
And we're giving you this heads up because Dune is long and Priory of the Orange Tree is longer. So even
they're
though
both dense, they're both very dense.
Yeah.
As well.
And so even though we're only going to be talking about 2 books in our episodes in the month of April, they take some time to crank through.
Beastly.